Is Lenovo going after the Switch and the Steam Deck? Here's AMD's plan to save Starfield on the Steam Deck. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Deck Ready. I hope you're spending your weekend playing a ton of video games. This is a big one for me because not only did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game come out, which obviously, look around here, I'm excited for that. Also, I got a code for Starfield. Unfortunately, can't test it on Steam Deck because it's a Windows app code, but I will be playing that as well. Let me know what you're playing down in the comments below, but the first thing I wanted to talk about this week is this new Lenovo Legion handheld that's leaking as much as the ROG Ally did, I would say, and we just now straight up know what it looks like, and it's honestly looking pretty interesting. If you didn't catch my last video on it, it's called the Lenovo Legion Go, and people were kind of thinking it would look more like their handheld that never came out. It was going to be Android based, and at the time I thought that looked pretty good. It looked like it was pulling more from the Neo Air 1S or something like that, but this new leak is showing us what it looks like, and it's basically if you took a 1X Player Mini and combined it with the Nintendo Switch. It's got a more octagonal shape, I would say, than the Steam Deck, and to me at least it looks pretty solid. The real winner here, I think at least, is the 8-inch screen, because it's basically what I want out of the Steam Deck screen. It's almost got no bezels on it, so it goes all the way to the edge on both sides, which looks incredible. And once you take the side controllers off, it looks like they work as straight up Joy-Cons. So you would think that maybe this thing will just come with a dock and also the Joy-Con attachment style controller that the Switch comes with. Like anything they can copy directly from the Switch, where this is just a handheld PC version of it, I think they should definitely do and just include in the box, because that's kind of the dream, I think, for a lot of people with these handheld PCs. The closer you can get to the Nintendo Switch, and then you can just say, hey, this thing will run games a lot better than your Switch, the more of these things I think you're going to sell. They also need to work pretty well out of the box and have good driver support and not have hardware failures. I've seen a ton of Reddit posts lately about a lot of returned ROG Allies, and you can actually get a pretty decent discount on them if you go to Best Buy and buy them open box, and that's mainly coming down to the fact that BIOS updates and just overall hardware failures have been a thing with that handheld. For me though, mine seems to be working great, and my thoughts on it have massively improved since I got the XG Mobile with a 4090. This thing is running any game I throw at it now, no problem, whether you're talking Baldur's Gate or you're talking Resident Evil 4, because I still play that all the time, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm playing stuff in 4K, and I do use frame generation quite a bit, but even when I don't use it, it still seems to hold a pretty rock solid 60 with most games. And while it hasn't fried any micro SD cards yet, I do have that issue that Jeff Grubb had, where if it gets hot enough, it actually just kind of forces the micro SD card out of the ROG Ally, which is pretty bizarre, but so far so good with it. Since they updated the BIOS and everything, it's been working great, and when you plug in the eGPU, you can use Nvidia control panel to limit the FPS and turn on VSync in game, and when you unplug it, the app becomes functionally useless, and you can use the AMD software when you're in handheld mode. So you get the best of both worlds on it. The only annoying thing is that you have to change your settings when you go back into handheld mode, because even down at 720p, this thing's not running any of these games at ultra settings. So I'd say Lenovo has a really cool opportunity here to kind of be an even better version of this ROG Ally plus eGPU situation, right? Like if they can make a dock where you can just drop this thing on and it connects through Thunderbolt 4, yeah, you're going to lose a little bit of performance that way, but it's going to be the most convenient way to get more performance out of this device when you drop it onto a dock, because I know people enjoy playing games on their Steam Deck and their ROG Ally with just a straight up dock. I've only really had fun playing games like Shovel Knight or Infernax or Dead Cells, these games that aren't super hard to run, but when you're talking a 3D game or something like that, I really would just rather use a more powerful PC. The utility and the novelty of docking a Steam Deck is kind of lost for me when I have a much better option available, but I understand for people who just have a Steam Deck and nothing else. Obviously that's your only option and it totally works. But with this Lenovo Legion Go, if you could think about being able to change out the graphics card over time and just use the CPU that's included in the device as a CPU, that immediately opens it up to be kind of the ultimate gaming handheld, and to me that sounds pretty cool. The other big difference between this thing and the ROG Ally is that this thing is going to use a different chip that's more made for ultrabooks, where it can perform at a high power capacity but not need as much cooling, and it's also built to be super thin, so this thing probably won't be as thick as a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally if they utilize their chip correctly, I would say. But yeah, when you're talking a game like Baldur's Gate 3, that Z1 Extreme in the ROG Ally is coming in super clutch because it can actually run the game all the way through at 30 FPS. Now you do have to set it at medium, you still have to use FSR Ultra Quality and at 720p, but if you use those same settings on the Steam Deck, I've seen people people saying that you should run it at 24 FPS, which to me, I can go down to 30 and be fine as long as it's a lock 30. Like you can drop to like 28 or 29 very infrequently and I'll be okay. But if you're talking running a game at movie frame rate, that's where you lose me. That is not what I think the Steam Deck was built to be, and that's getting to like Switch levels of cope in my opinion. So having a handheld like the ROG Ally where I can run a game like Baldur's Gate 3 at a very consistent 30 FPS that checks all my boxes and still looks good, I would love to have something like that continue to get more powerful over time. And having a new competitor with the Lenovo Legion Go, which is going to be usable in a completely different way, that's what gets me excited about this handheld PC market, because every single one of them has utility in a different way. Like for AAA games, I go right for the ROG Ally, but for pretty much everything else, like playing through the original Resident Evil 2 and 3, which I've done recently, I just go right for the Steam Deck because it can run those games perfectly. And even with the beta version that you get of EmuDeck that works with Windows by subscribing to their Patreon, I would still take the Linux version any day of the week because the setup works a lot better, and for me personally, games have just been running a lot better. I really want to know what Sony's doing over there, like with all of these handhelds coming out, like even ones with dedicated GPUs that Neo is making. Then you've got the Lenovo Legion Go, you've got the ROG Ally, you've got the Steam Deck. I just don't understand how they think the way they should go is to take a DualSense and chop it in half and just attach it to a tablet. That's like the easy way out for sure. And there's definitely a way they could compete with all of these different devices with some PlayStation first party IP. Like what are they doing over there? There's so many great handhelds out there, and now Nintendo's about to eat their lunch again with the Nintendo Switch, and it doesn't seem like they even care. But all right, next up here, let's talk about Starfield and if we're going to be able to run it on the Steam Deck. So we got a few deep dives since it was shown off at Xbox's version of E3 earlier this summer, and basically what Digital Foundry thought is that this game is going to be extremely CPU bound, which makes a lot of sense because most of Bethesda's games are very CPU bound. It also has to remember the placement of a lot of items in the world. It's using the same engine as a lot of the other Bethesda games. It just makes a lot of sense that it's CPU bound, which if you're looking at the Steam Deck could be a good sign, but also could be a bad sign. The saving grace that we had to look forward to about whether or not it would run on Steam Deck though is of course FSR2, which we know was going to be in the game because AMD partnered up with Bethesda and Xbox to make sure that it was going to be in the game. The frustrating update there, if you're someone who has an Nvidia card, is that someone data mined the Windows files for this game and figured out that it doesn't look like it's going to have any form of DLSS. And I know you can mod in DLSS to a lot of games, and the main team out there who does that is already working on Starfield and making that happen. And the most annoying thing that happens is with a lot of these games, the UI doesn't get upscaled, so I don't think I would even do that. But the big positive here is that AMD really wants to have FSR3 ready to go. Now, the reason FSR3 is so exciting is because it's going to have frame generation, which is a cool feature that DLSS has where it's able to introduce its own AI generated frames. And in my experience, at least with Diablo 4, I can't tell the difference when I'm using it between not AI generated frames. So if they can get it running and looking as good as DLSS 3 does, that would be a great boon for the Steam Deck. And nothing they've said so far has led us to believe this wouldn't be able to work on older chips, aka the Steam Deck and I guess the ROG Ally, whereas DLSS 3.0, you need a 40 series card for that to work. Now, my skepticism there is that if this is going to work on any modern AMD chip or graphics card, that means it's not going to be as powerful or as good as DLSS, because while people have backported DLSS 3 to 20 and 30 series cards, it doesn't work nearly as well as it does on 40 series cards, so it actually does seem to be a hardware limitation. But FSR 3.0 could be the saving grace for a game like Starfield, which is going to be very CPU intensive, right? I hope when this game comes out and it's available on Steam, people are able to get it up and running on the Steam Deck, and I would really love to have it on the go, especially with saves transferring to the point where I already have this game on Xbox and PC through the Xbox app. I would definitely consider buying another copy if I knew it was able to run on the Steam Deck. But yeah, unfortunately, there's no word on when FSR 3 is going to launch. They want Starfield to be one of its launch titles, but the way it's being written about makes it seem like they want to launch it with Starfield, and I really wish that was the case, but it seems like it's just going to be one of the first games supported. Like when DLSS 3 came out and they baked it into Cyberpunk. It seems like a situation like that with Starfield, where it's going to come out down the road and Starfield's going to be one of the first supported games. So we've been talking a lot lately about the verification system on the Steam Deck, mainly because of Remnant 2. That game launched verified and it does not run well at all on the Steam Deck, and now it's not even running well on my good PC. It's crashing quite a bit, so that game just seems like an Unreal Engine 5 technical mess. And people are saying that Baldur's Gate 3 is yet another game that was verified by Valve, but it really shouldn't be, because because it doesn't run all that amazing on the Steam Deck. Like if you want it to run at a locked 30 FPS, you have to dial up the FSR quite a bit, but unless you're using ultra quality, since it's FSR 1.0, I'm just gonna be honest here and say it looks like complete shit that way. So yeah, ever since the beginning of the Steam Deck's inception, the best way to figure out if a game is going to run on the deck is to go to ProtonDB or Steam Deck HQ. If they have a review for the game, they'll tell you the best settings, and they have been a godsend since this thing came out. But the other best option if you want some quick and dirty settings, or even just to know if a game is going to run, is to type in the game and then go to ProtonDB. So the way ProtonDB's default layout worked was that it was just straight up newest to oldest, and you'd see a little deck logo next to the thumbs up or thumbs down that signified people were playing on the deck. But there wasn't really a good way to sort it between deck settings and if it runs on the Steam Deck and other PCs, like desktop PCs. But as of August 15th, you can now sort individual games by Steam Deck or PC. And this is a super useful feature for me personally, because I've mentioned this a couple times. I've been playing through all the old Resident Evil games that I missed because it's one of my favorite series of all time, right? I just started with Resident Evil 4, then played 5, 6, Revelations, Revelations 2, the remakes, and all of those are more third-person shootery action style games, whereas the original games had tank controls and they were more focused on like slow, scary survival horror instead of blowing like 15 million zombies away. But the one action-heavy game that I've never played is Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, and I'm so glad that I didn't just go on G2A or Green Man Gaming and buy a code for that game, because it doesn't really work on PC. We got the update for Resident Evil 5 recently that completely removed Game for Windows Live, but the workaround you could use before for Games for Windows Live with Resident Evil 5, it didn't ever really work for Operation Raccoon City. So without a resource like ProtonDB, I would have bought that game from a third-party retailer and been SOL even starting the game up on my main Windows PC, let alone my Steam Deck. And it's super frustrating because I feel like that game would run pretty well, and I've watched some videos on it and it seems like it's really not as bad as people made it out to be when it came out, or they went back and patched it or something like that. Regardless, I just think it's a cool idea for a game to make a Left 4 Dead style third-person shooter that takes place during the events of Resident Evil 2. I just don't like that you're able to kill Leon in it. I think that's stupid. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to talk about ProtonDB really quick because it is really the ultimate resource for me when it comes to looking up settings or how to get a game running on the Steam Deck. Another great example was Resident Evil 5. I was able to figure out how to get that game to launch and skip over Games for Windows Live on the Steam Deck by just going to ProtonDB, and the same thing goes for Resident Evil 6. A lot of the cutscenes don't work in that game unless you use some launch commands, and also it's hard to run at 60 FPS without some very simple tweaks. So if I never looked that up on ProtonDB, I never would have played that game on my Steam Deck either. I would personally love it if Valve would just partner up with ProtonDB and just get that rating system built into Steam so that when we look at the Steam store, we don't have to look at this verified system that just straight up doesn't work. My suggestion was to introduce a verified plus checkmark that basically tells you not only does this game meet all of the other criteria, but it'll also run at 800p at 30 FPS using FSR at the very least, and you might be able to get 60 FPS of performance out of it if you tweak it a little bit. They need something like that. I know why they don't want to do it, because they might be able to get in some legal trouble if they're running a storefront where they're telling people not to buy games on a device that can take advantage of that storefront, but still, something's got to give here, and I feel like implementing ProtonDB as a plugin to Steam like Xbox did with How Long to Beat on the Xbox app on PC, I don't feel like that would be breaking any big boundaries. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Anyway guys, that's all I've got for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below, and remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.